The alignment of nations foretold in Ezekiel 38 and 39 is unfolding before our eyes. It is no longer hidden within the pages of ancient prophecy, no longer a distant vision waiting for the fullness of time. It is now. The names have changed, the empires have evolved, the languages are different, but the spirit behind these alignments remains the same. Ezekiel, the prophet in exile, looked across time and space and saw a vision of nations converging upon the land of Israel. He named them Gog, Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Persia, Cush, Put, Gomer, and Beth Togarmah. These ancient tribes and territories, translated into modern geography, encompass a very specific and shockingly familiar coalition. Persia is Iran. Gomer and Togarmah are the regions of modern-day Turkey. Cush is modern Sudan or Ethiopia. Put is Libya. Magog, according to many scholars and ancient sources, points toward the regions of Central Asia and most likely Russia. Meshech and Tubal, also in the areas surrounding modern-day Turkey and parts of Russia. What Ezekiel saw thousands of years ago is becoming the geopolitical reality of our generation. These are not simply coincidental movements. They are orchestrated alignments. Nations forming alliances, building military cooperation, engaging in trade and intelligence sharing, uniting not out of common culture or shared values, but out of a common opposition to one tiny sliver of land on the earth, Israel. Why, Israel? Why do these vast empires with their own complex histories converge with such animosity upon one small democratic nation the size of New Jersey? It makes no logical sense unless you understand the spiritual roots of this hostility. It is not about land. It is not about politics. It is about covenant. Israel represents the covenant of God. It is the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the enemy of God, spiritual forces operating behind the kingdoms of man, seek to destroy what God has ordained. Russia and Iran, two powers long separated by ideology, have drawn closer than ever in recent years. Military agreements, weapons transfers, joint exercises. Iran provides drones and munitions for Russia's war efforts. Russia, in return, supplies advanced weapons and satellite intelligence. This is not an abstract prophecy. It is current event. They are in Syria together. They are coordinating in global affairs. They are watching Israel together. Meanwhile, Turkey, under its current leadership, has shifted from a Western ally to a voice increasingly aligned with Islamist and anti-Israel rhetoric. Libya, still broken and volatile, is a breeding ground for extremist factions that serve as pawns for larger geopolitical games. Sudan remains unstable and vulnerable to influence from outside actors. The nations that Ezekiel listed are not quiet. They are stirring. And in the very region Ezekiel described, the mountains of Israel, the tension is rising. Consider Syria, just north of Israel's border. It has become a playground for these end-time powers. Iran builds missile factories and transport routes there. Russia has a military presence. Turkey has ambitions there. And all of them are positioning themselves not just for regional dominance, but for a future confrontation that Ezekiel foresaw, a mass coalition marching upon the land of Israel. The text says it clearly, they will come like a storm, like a cloud covering the land. They will say in their hearts, let us go up to the land of unwalled villages, to a people who live in safety. This is not describing ancient Israel. It's describing a modern, reborn nation. A nation that has returned after 2,000 years. A nation that, despite being surrounded by enemies, has lived in relative security. Unwalled, modernized, thriving. And yet the word also says God will put hooks in the jaws of these nations and draw them in. This speaks not of a random decision by political leaders, but a divine orchestration. God allows the storm to rise, not for Israel's destruction, but for his glory. He will judge these nations through their defeat. The nations of the world will know that he is the Lord. But before that judgment falls, the storm must form. And that is what we are witnessing now. We are living in the gathering of the clouds and the first tremors of the prophetic quake. In recent years, Israel has carried out hundreds of preemptive strikes against Iranian targets in Syria and beyond. Why? Because Iran continues to ship weapons through proxies like Hezbollah and build infrastructure aimed at surrounding and suffocating Israel. Iran's leaders openly call for Israel's destruction. They fund terror groups in Gaza, in Lebanon, in the West Bank. They have moved past diplomacy and into aggression. And yet the world remains mostly silent. It is not silence. It is blindness. The nations cannot see what is unfolding, but the watchman on the wall can. Those who know the scriptures, who understand the word of God, can see clearly that we are not moving toward peace. We are moving toward prophetic collision. The Abraham Accords, though celebrated, have not quieted the storm. They have only redrawn the map. While some Arab nations have joined with Israel, others have hardened. The divide is growing, the alignment is forming. And this is exactly what Ezekiel saw. He saw a division. Those who came to invade and those who merely questioned. He speaks of Sheba and Dedan, modern Saudi Arabia and Gulf states, saying, "Have you come to plunder?" They don't intervene. They only speak. This too is what we see now. Strong words, weak actions. This is not a time for speculation. It is a time for preparation. We are watching prophecy come to pass not in symbolic metaphors, but in real-time geopolitical headlines. The ancient words are matching the modern world with chilling precision. And while the world sleeps, the prophecy marches forward. The convergence of these nations is not just a sign of war, it is a sign of the soon return of the King. For all prophecy points not just to judgment, but to redemption. The conflict in the Middle East is not merely political, it is a countdown to a kingdom. The shaking of the nations will precede the coming of the Messiah. But before that day, the world will tremble, the alliances will tighten, and the armies will march. So open your eyes. Do not look at these events as distant affairs. Look at them as signs. Look at them as warnings. Look at them as divine reminders that time is short, the word is true, and the hour is late. The coalition of Ezekiel is no longer theoretical. It is operational. The ancient names are now modern nations. The blueprint is no longer hidden. It is unfolding. And those who have ears to hear must hear. Those who have eyes to see must see, for the storm is gathering, and the hand of prophecy is moving. Iran's hatred and rising power mirrors the spirit of Persia in biblical prophecy. This is not just a regime with nuclear ambitions or a nation playing politics on the world stage. It is a vessel for an ancient spirit, the same spirit that once moved the kings of Persia against the people of God. In the time of Esther, the Persian Empire was the seat of a decree for annihilation. A plot formed by Haman to wipe out every Jew from the face of the earth. And just as then, the threat did not arise from military necessity or political calculation. It rose from hatred, deep, irrational, spiritual hatred for a people marked by the covenant of God. Today, that same ancient land is called Iran. And once again, it is driven by the same venomous intent. The names have changed, the empires have fallen, but the spirit continues. Iran's leaders do not simply oppose Israel, they obsess over its destruction. They speak of erasing it. They call it a cancer. They pour billions into proxy armies whose sole mission is to choke and burn the land of promise. From Hezbollah in the north to Hamas in the south, from Shia militias in Iraq to operatives in Syria, Iran's hand is in every shadow. It is a web of terror and destruction spun with one singular aim: to surround Israel, to crush it, to bring it to its knees. The missiles are not built for defense. The tunnels are not for trade. The rhetoric is not idle. It is all preparation for the war Ezekiel foresaw. But why Israel? Why this small nation that threatens no one, that seeks no conquest? Because this is not about geography. It is about the throne of God on earth. Iran stands not just against a nation, but against the ancient promises of the Most High. Its leaders may speak in political terms, but the true war is not political. It is spiritual. It is the age-old war of light versus darkness, of truth versus deception, of covenant versus rebellion. The nuclear program of Iran is not simply a modern threat. It is a prophetic trigger. With every centrifuge that spins, the world inches closer to the fulfillment of what Ezekiel described. The weapons of mass destruction that Iran seeks are not aimed at power. They are aimed at prophecy. For Iran believes in its own apocalyptic vision. It is not hidden. It is openly declared. They speak of the return of the Mahdi, the hidden Imam, and they believe that chaos must precede his coming. They are not simply willing to endure a global conflict. They welcome it. They see war as the furnace from which their messianic era will emerge. And in their doctrine, Israel stands as the chief obstacle, the enemy to be removed, so their vision can be realized. This is why they do not just attack with bombs, but with ideology, with funding, with religious fervor. And this is why the world cannot understand them, Because the world thinks in terms of diplomacy and economics, while Iran thinks in terms of divine war. The spirit of Persia has risen again, cloaked in the garments of modernity, but animated by the same ancient hatred. It is the spirit that once inspired Haman. It is the spirit that sought to halt the rebuilding of the temple. It is the spirit that sought to dominate Jerusalem. And now it has taken root in a regime that controls not just territory, but minds and movements across the region. Iran trains the terrorists, arms the proxies, funds the unrest. It operates in shadows but speaks openly. When their leaders chant to death to Israel, it is not a metaphor. It is a declaration of intent. And the world hears but does not believe. It hears but does not act. It hears but does not awaken. But prophecy does not require belief to unfold. It requires only the passage of time, and time is moving swiftly. The more Iran rises, the more the words of Ezekiel glow with urgency. Persia will march, he said. It will come in alliance with Gog, with Magog, with others from the north and east. Together they will rise like a storm. And what is a storm but a sudden violent convergence of forces? That is what we are seeing. Iran has moved from the fringes to the center. Its hands reach into Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Gaza. Its missiles grow longer in range, more accurate in targeting. Its drones fly over Israel. Its generals speak with confidence. Its scientists work in secret. And all of it is pointing toward a day that was spoken of by the prophets. A day of invasion. A day of reckoning. But Iran's rise is not the end of the story. For the same prophecy that reveals the storm also reveals its downfall. Ezekiel declares that God himself will intervene. He will bring judgment upon the invading armies. He will strike with fire, with hail, with confusion. He will defend his people, not because they are righteous, but because they are chosen. Not because they are mighty, but because he is faithful. And in that day, the name of the Lord will be known among the nations. The fall of Persia will not be by human hand, but by divine decree. And so the rise of Iran is not merely a threat. It is a sign that the time is near, a sign that the ancient clock is ticking toward midnight, a sign that the spiritual war is accelerating. It is a trumpet blast to the watchful, a warning to the sleeping, a call to the faithful. Iran's power is rising, but it is rising only to fall. For every empire that has stood against Jerusalem has fallen. Babylon fell, Rome fell, Nazi Germany fell, the Soviet Union fell. And so too shall this regime fall, not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of the living God. We must not fear, but we must see. We must not be anxious, but we must be alert. For prophecy is not given to scare, it is given to prepare. The shaking will come. The nations will rage. The storm will rise. But in it all, the purposes of God will stand. Iran may rise with fire and fury, but it will fall before the glory of the Lord. And all the world will know that he is God. Israel is not just a nation. It is the epicenter of divine prophecy, the timepiece of the end times, and the land upon which the future of the world will pivot. The rebirth of Israel in 1948 was not just a historical moment. It was a supernatural sign. It was foretold by the prophets, seen in the vision of Ezekiel, declared in the valley of dry bones, where the scattered remains of a people would be gathered from the nations, restored to their land, and stand again as a living nation. That which had not existed for nearly 2 millennia was born in a day. No other nation in history has returned from exile after such a span of time. No other people has maintained their identity, their language, and their covenant in the midst of persecution, dispersion, and attempted annihilation. And yet Israel stands. It is not by the hand of man, but by the will of God. For he said, I will gather you from all the nations to which you have been scattered, and I will bring you back to your own land. The restoration of Israel is not a political act. It is a prophetic fulfillment. And because it is prophetic, the entire world has been drawn to it. What happens in Israel matters, not because of oil or power or numbers, but because it is the land of the covenant. It is the land where Abraham walked, where Moses longed to enter, where David reigned, and where the Messiah will return. Jerusalem is not just a city. It is the city of the great king. It is the footstool of God on earth. And because of this, the forces of darkness have always sought to control it, defile it, divide it. The United Nations may treat it as a political issue, but heaven sees it as a spiritual axis. The world sees Israel as a regional problem. The word sees it as the epicenter of the final conflict. Ezekiel's prophecy places Israel at the center of a future invasion. The nations gather, not against New York or London or Beijing, but against the mountains of Israel. Why? Because that is where the covenant dwells. That is where the promises of God are rooted. That is where the enemy must strike if he is to challenge the throne of heaven. The battle of Gog and Magog is not just about territory. It is about sovereignty. It is about whose word will prevail, the word of the enemy or the word of the Lord. And the answer is already written. The nations will come, but they will fall. The weapons will rise, but they will be shattered. The invaders will march, but they will not prevail. For the Lord has said, I will defend my land. I will magnify myself, and I will sanctify my name in the sight of many nations. Every modern move against Israel is part of the ancient war. Every resolution in the halls of international power, every threat from neighboring regimes, every terror attack, every missile launched, it all stems from the same root, the enemy's fury against a people chosen by God. And yet, despite all opposition, Israel thrives. Surrounded by nations who seek its destruction, it remains a light of innovation, strength, and resilience. But this is not a coincidence. It is a testimony that the God of Israel still watches over his people, that he who brought them back will keep them, that he who restored them will defend them. But make no mistake, the shaking is not yet over. The birth was miraculous, but the final conflict is yet to come. The tensions we see today are not isolated incidents. They are contractions like birth pangs, increasing in frequency and intensity. Each war, each skirmish, each diplomatic crisis is a step closer to the final day when the nations will surround Israel in fulfillment of the word. And when that day comes, Israel will once again stand alone. Just as in the days of the Exodus, just as in the days of Esther, just as in the days of 1967 and 1973, the world will turn its back. But heaven will not. For in that hour, God will arise. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who felled the walls of Jericho, who struck down the armies of Pharaoh, he will rise again in defense of his people. Ezekiel tells us that the armies will come like a storm, but they will be struck with confusion, with fire, with judgment. God will fight not with the weapons of men, but with the elements, with supernatural force, and all the nations will see and know that the Holy One of Israel reigns. This is not just a story of defense, it is a story of revelation. Through Israel's deliverance, the glory of God will be revealed to the whole earth. The world will witness a miracle just as they did when the dry bones lived. But this time the miracle will be in fire and judgment. The restoration of Israel was the beginning. The confrontation will be the climax, and the redemption will be the fulfillment. For after the battle, after the shaking, after the fire falls, the word declares that God will pour out his spirit upon the house of Israel. The veil will be lifted. The eyes will be opened. The hearts will turn. And what was partial will become whole. The spiritual rebirth of Israel will follow the physical one, and the world will stand in awe. This is why the enemy fears Israel, not because of its military or technology, but because of its destiny, because it is the clock of prophecy. When you see Israel surrounded, you know the time is near. When you see Jerusalem at the center of controversy, you know the stage is set. When you see the mountains of Israel trembling, you know the king is coming. And so, the eyes of the world are fixed on this small strip of land, and rightly so. For it is not just the focus of the news, it is the focus of prophecy. It is the countdown clock. It is the testing ground. It is the sign. Those who understand this will not be shaken by the coming storm. They will be anchored. For they know that what is written must come to pass, and that God will not abandon his promises. Let the nations rage. Let the enemies plot. Let the darkness gather. For in the end, Israel will stand, not because of its own strength, but because the word of the Lord has gone forth. He who touches you, says the Lord, touches the apple of my eye. The armies of Gog and Magog will fall. The weapons will burn. The names of the invaders will be forgotten, but Israel will remain, and the name of the Lord will be exalted. So watch Israel. Pray for Israel. Pray for Israel. Stand with Israel. For it is not just a nation. It is a sign, a mirror reflecting the nearness of the hour, and the hour is late. The signs are clear. The storm is rising, and the king is near. The stage is being set for a supernatural clash between the forces of darkness and the covenant of God. This is not merely a battle of armies, weapons, or ideologies. It is the ancient conflict between heaven and hell, between the authority of the Almighty and the rebellion of fallen principalities. What is forming before our very eyes is not just geopolitical tension, but the unfolding of divine drama. Every movement in the Middle East, every alliance forged in secret, every war rehearsal, and every missile launched is a thread in the tapestry that was woven long ago by the hand of prophecy. The armies of Gog and Magog, of Persia and her allies, of the north and of the east, are assembling not because of coincidence, but because of convergence. A convergence that the prophets saw long before our age even began. And at the center of it all stands the land of Israel, the people of the covenant, the mountain of the Lord. But this war will be unlike any that has come before it. Nations will rise and armies will march, but it will not be resolved through strategy or diplomacy. It will not be won through treaties or technology. This war will be settled by divine intervention, by the supernatural hand of God himself. For the Lord declared through Ezekiel that in that day he would magnify himself. He would sanctify his name in the eyes of the nations. And he would do it through judgment. The very forces that come to destroy Israel will become instruments of their own destruction. They will come with pride, but they will fall with terror. They will come as a storm, but they will be scattered by the breath of God. In this coming conflict, the world will see what it has forgotten, the reality of the supernatural. For too long, mankind has trusted only in what it can see, what it can calculate, what it can control. But the shaking that is coming will remind the world that there is a God in heaven who rules in the affairs of men. He is not silent. He is not distant. He is watching. He is waiting. And when the fullness of iniquity comes, he will act, just as he did in Egypt when he parted the sea, just as he did at Jericho when the walls fell without a hand, just as he did on Mount Carmel when fire fell from heaven. So too will he act again in the days to come, and the world will be without excuse. The supernatural nature of this coming clash is not limited to signs in the heavens or judgments on the earth. It will also be a battle in the spirit. Behind every nation rising against Israel stands a principality. Behind every general plotting invasion is a spiritual force of darkness. Behind every weapon pointed at Jerusalem is a demonic assignment. But the people of God do not war according to the flesh. Their weapons are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. This is why prayer matters. This is why watchfulness matters. Because the battle is not only on the ground, it is in the heavenlies. The forces arrayed against the covenant are ancient, powerful, and furious. But they are not sovereign. They are not eternal. They are not victorious. The end has already been written. When the armies of Gog and Magog descend, when Persia and her allies attack, the world will watch in horror. Cities will tremble, markets will collapse, leaders will panic. But those who know the word will not be surprised. They will recognize the signs. They will understand the hour. For the prophets spoke clearly: the convergence of nations, the rise of hostility, the isolation of Israel, the shaking of the earth. These are not random events. They are birth pangs. They are the trumpet blasts of prophecy. They are the final warnings before the day of the Lord. But in the midst of judgment, there is also mercy. God never acts without purpose. The supernatural shaking is not only to punish, it is to awaken, to open the eyes of a blind world, to call back the lost, to remind Israel of her destiny. For in the aftermath of the battle, the word declares that the eyes of Israel will be opened. The veil will be lifted. They will see the one whom they have pierced. They will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son, and they will return, not to religion, not to ritual, but to the covenant, to the living God. This is the goal of the supernatural clash, not only to defeat the enemy, but to redeem the people, to reveal the glory of God, to usher in the final chapter of his divine plan. And every event now unfolding is moving toward that moment. The alliance is forming, the weapons building, the chaos spreading. It is all according to pattern. And the people of God must not be distracted. They must not be lulled to sleep by the comforts of the world. They must be alert, watching, praying, preaching. For the time is short. The supernatural clash will not wait for man's schedule. It will come like a thief in the night. It will break upon the world like sudden travail. And those who have not prepared will be swept away. But those who have eyes to see and ears to hear will be ready. They will not be afraid. For they stand not on sand, but on the rock. They fear not the armies of Gog, nor the threats of Persia, nor the fury of the nations. They fear the Lord, and in him they are safe. The stage is not just being set, it is nearly complete. The actors are in place. The lines have been written. The script has been declared. The only thing left is the opening of the final act. And when it comes, it will come swiftly. The lightning will flash, the thunder will roar, and the world will tremble before the God of Israel. The covenant will be vindicated. The word will be fulfilled. The enemies of God will fall, and the king will be exalted. So watch and do not grow weary. Stand and do not be moved. For the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise. He is preparing the final confrontation, the supernatural battle that will shake the heavens and the earth. And when it is over, there will be no more doubt. The nations will know that he is the Lord. The powers of darkness will be silenced. And the covenant of God will shine like the morning sun. Let the armies gather. Let the threats rise. Let the storm rage. For the Lord of hosts is coming. The Lion of Judah will roar, and all flesh will see his glory. The supernatural war is at the door, and the king is on his way.